Okay, so David is an ELL who some of the issues he's dealing with are the fourth grade slump and his dropping test scores, as well as not having success with the current programs that are in place. For the fourth grade slump, some of the main problems I consider with the fourth grade slump are students moving from learning to read to reading to learn. So instead of just learning words that are basics, they're going to be reading to get information about content and topics. Struggling readers before fourth grade will be left even further behind. If they cannot read at grade level, they're going to be left even further behind. So they're going to have more trouble once they get to that fourth grade because they're no longer learning to read rather than reading to learn, as we've said before. And another problem that happens with the fourth grade slump is because they're focusing so much on learning to read rather than reading to learn, they have a lack of domain-specific knowledge prior to this. Some possible solutions that can be used for the fourth grade slump are that teachers can build subject area knowledge prior to fourth grade so that when it happens in fourth grade, it's not such a new concept necessarily. And prior to fourth grade as well, teachers can encourage reading habits that help understand context of the words being sounded out in earlier grades. So rather than just learning to read, they're learning what those words mean rather than just how to say them and how to read them. The other problem with David is his falling test scores. Some solutions to this would be the use of Language One resources for translations because he might understand the content in his home language rather than in English. So it might be best to translate back to things he knows so that he's familiar with the concept. Frequent interaction with other students in authentic learning experiences. If he is allowed to be paired with a student who is in the same language but at a different proficiency level, maybe it might help him to understand the learning because they might be able to help explain to him as well as he might be able to teach the other student what he knows, and that will help his learning in the long run as well. Going back to basics with the learning to read, rather than just reading to learn, he needs to go back and learn how to read rather than just being expected to use that knowledge, because he's had some success up till a certain grade, but now that he's gotten to fourth grade, he's falling behind again, so he needs to move back a little bit so that he gets that language proficiency down before he's expected to learn more things. These test scores are likely because they're standardized tests using just paper and pencil to evaluate them, and so one way to maybe better evaluate that would be to use a variety of techniques to do this evaluation. So maybe have an oral proficiency exam rather than what does this word mean on paper kind of exam. As well as his teachers can reduce the language load required for learning the content in class so that all of his other grades in the other classes such as science remain just as high, and then all the other strategies can be used to evaluate his learning of reading and the content. And then there are some sources I used to pull some of that information. I learned a little bit about Read Naturally as well, just to learn about what kind of program that was using. So in the other scenario, there's an issue where you're a first-year teacher and your students are not engaged with your lesson, and you want them to be learning more from the lesson than their test scores are showing. A couple strategies I pulled from this are the actual reading itself, because it said in the scenario that they were doing individualized textbook reading. So some things that can be done to help with the reading, you could use trade books to supplement the textbook so that they're getting more authentic experiences rather than just what's written in a textbook. Using guided reading strategies such as shared reading or read alouds, being able to focus on specific points of content rather than just reading the words on the page would be helpful for them to be learning the information. And another strategy would be note-taking strategies. So if they're taking notes during the reading, that would be done likely as a shared reading rather than just individualized textbook reading. Giving them a way to take notes, like guided notes maybe, or a foldable to fill out as they're reading would help them stay engaged in that. Another way would be through hands-on activities. One hands-on unit at the end is not enough for students to retain information, which is what's being done now. As the teacher says, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So rather than having them just read the information or hear it through lecture, having them do something to make them understand it better would help have them learn it better in the long run and remember it. Students are more likely to remember information or concepts by physically doing things that support their learning, so they're going to remember it and retain that information. And lecture-based instruction is being overdone in the previous the way the lesson's being taught, so reducing the lecture and doing more would help with that concept. This kind of ties in with interaction between students. They need to have frequent interaction with each other rather than only the teacher. This helps with ELLs too, according to the SIOP model of instruction. Being able to interact with each other and the material rather than just hearing about it from the teacher is going to give them better understanding of it in the long run. Doing a think, pair, share activity might help them like boost their learning right at the beginning. So maybe at the beginning of the lesson, you could have them be in pairs, do a think, pair, share, so they'd get together and think about it for a minute, like talk with each other, and then each pair would be asked to share something about what they learned from the previous day or about what they learned in that day's lesson, maybe at the end of the class. And you could also let them work on their exit slips in pairs, because maybe it might kind of boost the level of understanding you're getting in those exit slips by being able to kind of help them remember what they learned if they missed something or something like that. This also allows all students to participate in learning rather than the few that will participate whether they're called on or not. Groups during these activities through interaction can be assigned according to the class's needs individually. So they can be grouped by ability, proximity, or homogeneously, depending on the needs of that specific class. And like I said, with textbook reading, guided notes can provide interaction with the material when lecture is used or textbook reading is used, but obviously we'd like that, either lecture or textbook reading, to be used more sparingly than in previous units anyway. And then, because they're failing a test, and that seems to be the most prominent problem, I would do formative assessments built into the lesson, so maybe a thumbs activity where they give you a thumbs up, side thumbs, or thumbs down to check for their understanding, as well as maybe worksheet checks for understanding that aren't used for grades in the grade book, but maybe just to check to see where they are by doing a worksheet that covers the materials for the day. And then before you even do that, a pre-assessment would check what students already know, as well as make sure that what they already know is what you want them to know, because they could have been taught something maybe incorrect in a previous class, and you want to make sure that they're all on the same page and don't have any background information that might confuse them as to what they want to be learning now. And then for post or summative assessments, using more different methods for evaluation than just a paper test would probably give students a better way of demonstrating that they've actually learned in that lesson, because some students just have trouble with that paper and pencil type test. So maybe giving them the opportunity to do like a poster or a presentation about what they've done, or maybe having a conversation about what they've learned would be a better way of evaluating that. And that is all I have. Thank you.